The Bond villains. One of the many reasons I enjoy the series is the villains. Today we're doing my top 10 Bond villains. Now, keep in mind, these are my personal opinions, and it's all completely subjective. I'm ranking them purely on how memorable I find them and the actor's performance in question. Now, with that, I want to kick off with a dishonorable and honorable mention. The dishonorable mention will sadly go to Dominic Green, portrayed by Matthew Malak. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. The reason why I hate this villain is because he stars in my opinion, the worst Bond film of the series. Now, I've got nothing against the actor in question, but I feel that his performance is so underwhelming and completely lets me down. And overall, there's just nothing completely new. He's just bland. And that's a shame because he comes after our honorable mention, which is Le Chiffre, portrayed by Mads Mikkelsen. First off, sorry if I pronounce any of the actors' name wrong. Firstly, Mads really just nails this character and portrays him as a banker for terrorists. And the fact that he's a pawn, on the larger scale, he's not that huge or menacing, but it makes sense for Bond's very first villain to go up against. It would be someone of this nature. Another thing I find interesting is first off, the eye. I find that it's a little bit scarring, just to be quite intimidating. I also happen to find that, just how smart he is, how vulnerable he is. He's very human, but also I kind of like it that when he does, spoiler alert, he does get killed, but Bond doesn't kill him, which I find to be very refreshing, because only twice in the series has the main villain get killed not by Bond. And I find that this to be very interesting. Anyway, let's kick off the list. Coming in at number 10, we give it to Bond's very first villain, Dr. No, portrayed by Joseph Wiseman. I like how Dr. No is basically a mad scientist outcast and does what he does purely for revenge. He does it because he was an outcast by his own, because he's part German, part Chinese, of the Asian culture, and because he's an outcast by them, the only society that was accept him were criminals, and Spectre gladly embraced him with open arms. Overall, this is Bond's very first main villain, and I like how we are built up to him before his big reveal, and it was worth the wait. I would have loved we could have seen more of him, which is why he's at number 10, but he deserves the number 10 spot as the very first Bond villain in Eon series, the main villain, and Joseph just does the role with absolute class, and also the line delivery is so classic. Coming in at number 9 is Dr. Kananga. In my opinion, a villain that is, sort of one of the few villains in the series that is gaining a sort of cult following by I'm sure a lot of Bond fans, and I really like him. He's a politician, but is also a crime lord. He has such a lot of swagger, charisma, but he's also very threatening. One of the first times in the series where the main villain, you could argue, is truly psychotic, and also possessive, and also paranoid. Yaphet Kotto really just nails the performance here, and absolutely a joy to watch. That's all I can say. And his villain plan is very interesting too. Of course, I won't reveal it because you've got to see the movie for yourself. I find it to be a plan that gangsters today could use, if they are even smart enough to, and I pray I haven't bloody given them an idea. Anyway, at number 8 is Revellion. The first time Bond ever went up against a rogue 00 agent. But it won't be the last, of course. But a reason why I like this guy so much is because he was friends with Bond. They were friends, colleagues, and even his death seems to have affected Bond. Well, again, he faked his own death in the beginning of the movie, and his revenge plot is interesting too, but it does kind of get a bit muffled up throughout the film. Overall, Sean Bean as 006 really just nails the performance for me, and he's absolutely a joy to watch. And yeah, and the fact that he fights Bond on a physical and mental level. Overall, a classic villain for the series. At number 7, Max Zoran, portrayed by character actor Christopher Walken. First off, this is hands down the most psychotic villain Bond will ever have gone up against, and it's really hard to nail, to say otherwise. This role was originally supposed to go to David Bowie, but I'm glad Christopher got to play him, and he just nails the role. He just kicks it out of the park. Overall, Christopher Walken really just goes full-on psycho. He's a younger version of Auric Goldfinger, but he's far more psychotic, and his death is also pretty interesting too. Although A View to a Kill may not be the best film in the series, I find that even some of the worst films in the series do have, in my opinion, some of the best villains of the series. And nothing will be more true within our number 6. Scaramanga, portrayed by Christopher Lee. Enough said, really, but we can go more in deep. I like how he is a gunman for hire. He charges $1 million a shot, his signature is a golden bullet, hence his nickname, the man with the golden gun. And Christopher Lee does the role with such a sophisticated hitman who sees Bond as not as a challenge, but he also views him as a friend, and views him as his equal, and he's also in many ways an aspiring villain to rise up in the ranks. He wants to be the supervillain, but he's a hitman. Anyway, although the film he's in is pretty not that popular with the fandom, we can all agree that Scaramanga is an absolute classic in the series, and Scaramanga, portrayed by Lee, just does the role with absolute class, and that's all we can say. Now, my next choice is going to get a bit of outrage, but here we go. At number 5 is Elektra, portrayed by Sophia Marceau. Again, hope I pronounced it right. Okay, why do I like this villain so much? First off, it's the first time a main villain is female. Now, we rarely get that. In fact, to this day, you'd argue Elektra is the only main villain for a Bond series. Now, I could argue Rosa Klebb did it back in From Russia with Love, but I disagree. Rosa Klebb was clearly a secondary villain. Overall, Elektra King is a unique villain to the series. First off, she's seen as this innocent character that Bond falls for, and she manipulates his emotions for her. Very interesting. And her death is also fitting quite as well. Overall, I just really wish... The reason why she's at number 5 is, first off, I find it to be far more enjoyable, but also a bit more nostalgic for her, rather than I did with Scaramanga, in a way. And I do like that they had some good ideas with their character, but even I must admit, I wish they could have pushed it more. But overall, I think The World Is Not Enough. The movie is gaining a bit more of an interesting and more of a fondness now than it did when it was released. But overall, I just really feel that Elektra is just a really fun villain. And I just really hope we can get another female lead villain. But I highly doubt it, to be honest. But I welcome the opportunity. Coming in at number 4 is Raul Silva, portrayed by Javier Bardem. First off, wow. The only villain on this list to have completed his villain goal. And he's also a rather sympathetic one too. He was a former agent who was sold out by his boss, so his sole motivation is revenge. In fact, yeah. The fact he's another rogue agent is kind of shouts out to Alex Trevelyan, but something I want to point out is that unlike Trevelyan, I feel like they really went something completely different with this guy. They both have justifiable motivations. They both want revenge, but I really feel a little bit more sympathy for him than I ever did with Alec, which is weird because if you actually think about it, Alex should be the one with more sympathy than Raul, but still, Silva is just great. Bardem really just brings such menacing, just overall menace to the role. And overall, I really like the screen presence this guy had out of all the villains so far on this list. He's psychotic, hint of homosexual, he's smart, he can handle himself in a fight, and when we see him, he has such a great introduction. I'm just waiting for the showdown between both him and Bond. And overall, it was worth the wait, and it wasn't a disappointment. Coming in at number 3, Sanchez, portrayed by Robert Davi. Hands down, pretty much the most underrated villain on this entire list. Robert Davi is my kind of villain. He's a crime lord with a code. You know, he'll be friends to you in 1 minute, but kill you in the next. He lives by a code. Loyalty is more important to him than money. So he firmly understands that loyalty is something that goes both ways. Overall, even though we want him to be dead for what he did in the movie, in fact, the whole reason Bond's even after a drug dealer, a crime lord, is because of what his actions he did in the beginning of the movie. I like how License to Kill is a film that's giving a bit of a following, and the fact that it's one of the darkest films in the series. And it made sense that you need a villain that's a bit dark to be the villain of that piece. And Robert Davi as Sanchez is really great. He's menacing, he's evil, but he's also quite charming. He's quite sophisticated, and I feel that Robert Davi just nails the performance here, and it was worth every moment of this performance. Number 2, giving it to another movie classic, another Bond villain classic, Auric Goldfinger from Goldfinger. What can we say that it won't even come close to even at all mentioning just how classic Goldfinger is? On the surface, he's basically a businessman, but he's a businessman obsessed with gold. He admires the color and he views crime as an art. He views his whole scheme as this absolute years in the making, like a project that he's been working on. Goldfinger was portrayed by Gert Frobe, but believe it or not, throughout the film he was actually dubbed by Michael Collins. Overall, I did not know that. It took me until a video on another Bond film, on another YouTuber, to even remotely tell me that. I was shocked, because I honestly thought this guy wasn't even remotely dubbed. Overall, he's just so classic. His scheme is classic. And although his death may be... Okay, the concept of his death is not that bad, but how it was filmed has of course not aged as well. But another thing I also gotta like is his clothing. How it's just like he wears these like yellow type clothing that's meant to mirror gold, hence to his obsession. Overall, he's such classic villains to the screen, and to many he's either at the number 2 spot or at the number 1 spot for Bond villains. But in my opinion, I have one villain who I feel is the greatest villain of them all. Ladies and gentlemen, number 1, Blofeld. I know, it's sort of come like you would expect it. Blofeld is always going to appear on a Bond list because he is Bond's arch nemesis. Now, I want to point out here, Blofeld's character is so great as it was built up to his actual reveal. But I'm only ranking 2 Blofelds on this list, and my 2 personal favorites, because I can't bear myself to only just have one on the list. Now, to be fair, for quite a while, in fact for at least years, I've always only had Telly Savalas as the only Blofeld, and my personal favorite Blofeld. But I guess the Donald Pleasance has slowly grown on me a bit more, and in many ways, Donald Pleasance, which as Blofeld, who appeared in You Only Live Twice, over here, is the classic Blofeld. From the scarring, to the costume, to that stare he gives you. The infamous reveal we got in You Only Live Twice was the moment we've all been waiting for. Now, that is the classic version, and I heavily started to appreciate that more now. But if I could be honest, Telly Savalas, right here, will always be my favorite Blofeld. The only reason I put, honestly, Pleasance here is because I feel that he should at least be acknowledged. But he doesn't deserve an honourable mention, but he does deserve a place on the list. And I feel that both Blofelds should have the number 1 spot. Telly Savalas does the role differently to Pleasance, and I feel that that's how Blofeld should be. He's a chameleon, always changing appearance, and as he does, he changes personality. So therefore, you can have your own preferred take. Donald Pleasance will always be my preferred take on the character, but however, I cannot deny that Pleasance is good. So that's why I've decided that they should be tied. They are just, in my opinion, they are both iconic, they are both great, both actors absolutely deliver their performance and in their respected movies, and I really like how Blofeld is back in the film franchise now. Despite what we may think about Christopher Waltz now in Blofeld, I personally rather enjoyed his performance, But here, these two are the original Blofelds, and will go down in history as the greatest Blofelds of, not just in the whole series, but in my opinion, they are my number one favorite villains. A tie. So there you have it, my top 10 Bond villains. Join me next time as I rank my top 10 Bond henchmen. And until we meet again, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.